Hi, I'm Tina Shull. I'm a lecturer in the UCI History Department. I'm also a Soros Justice Fellow at the nonprofit Civic, Community Initiatives for Visiting Immigrants in Confinement. My talk is titled Doing History as Climate Action, Collaborating with Nonprofits on Storytelling and Public Education Projects. I will discuss how a climate refugees history course I taught this winter at UCI has become a springboard for producing a collaborative multimedia project that features the stories of migrants in U.S. immigration detention and refugee camps abroad. In thinking what historians can bring to the strategies of the Knowledge Action Network, first and foremost, helping to answer that thorny question of how did we get here? By utilizing methods of archival research, oral histories, approaches of narrative and rhetorical analysis, and by exploring the relationships between actors, social structures, and environments, can not only help us understand the present, but what we discover and how that process of discovery that's inherent to history as a discipline can provide us with actionable tools for moving forward. I came into this somewhat unintentionally. I ended up first teaching an upper division history course titled Climate History and Global Warming at UCI a couple years ago. It was a course that I inherited from the department chair, David Igler. And it ended up being one of the best experiences, I think, because of how engaged the students were in the course topic. And in the course of teaching this class, I became increasingly aware of and interested in how environmental history and the story of the rise of man-made climate change in particular depends upon understandings of histories of imperialism, race and racism, capitalism and class warfare. In other words, histories of race, class, and gender inequality. These are histories that I've always been invested in as an immigration and U.S. foreign relations historian. And this first course led me to become part of UC Irvine's network of climate change and sustainability scholars. I participated in a teaching climate change and sustainability retreat in Anza Borrego last spring. And from this, I developed a new course that I taught this year called Climate Refugees. And this is a upper division writing and history methods course. And I also joined the Knowledge Action Network. Currently, I'm only teaching at UCI part-time, and I'm full-time working as a Soros Justice Fellow at the nonprofit Civic. And Civic serves people in immigration detention across the country. So today, I will talk about how this class has blossomed into a collaboration with the nonprofit I work at, and how I've enlisted the collaboration of former students, professors, grad students, at other UC and CSU campuses, as well as UCI and UCI's Office of Sustainability. And I hope that the Knowledge Action Network can serve as a platform for disseminating the project once it's complete. So just a quick overview of the course that I taught. As I mentioned, it was a history methods research and writing course. It was a small seminar, so it was very discussion and writing intensive. The course description reads, what do Syrian refugees living in Britain, Marshallese families in Springdale, Arkansas, and Mexican agricultural workers in California have in common? Environmental factors, and more specifically, those related to man-made climate change, have played a large role in forcing these groups from their homes. Additionally, these groups find themselves at the center of international security, economic, and political debates over a growing global refugee crisis. In this writing and discussion intensive seminar, we will explore the historical relationship between environmental changes and patterns of migration, and what it means to be a climate refugee or environmental migrant in the era of man-made climate change. We will also look at how these displacements have created new opportunities for collective responses to addressing climate change that are rooted in migrant, indigenous land, and human rights. It was a 10-week course, and in the first couple of weeks, we introduced climate change as an issue so that we could have a grasp on it as reality. Haha. We also looked at refugee reception and international law, and on the very first day, problematized the term climate refugee and why or why not various groups might want to appeal to that term. So that was the subject of first writing assignment on the first day and discussion. And then we approached environmental history from a variety of angles and looked at the historical relationship between climate and migration. The next few weeks, the middle weeks of the quarter, we paired various effects of climate change with migration, quote, crises, starting with storms, hurricanes, El Nino cycles, and their relationship to famine and migration. Then we looked at droughts, first in the Syrian civil war and then along the US-Mexico border. And this was really difficult, to be honest, because this was the first couple of weeks of the Trump administration. And just unintentionally, as I had planned this course out, the Trump administration's first taking down climate change information off of its website and then issuing its executive orders, the refugee travel ban and the immigration executive order calling for building the border wall. It coincided right alongside the course readings and our discussions on these very topics, which made for a very a timely and very, very heavy and difficult discussions that we had in course, but it ended up being a very positive experience at the same time. Next, we looked at rising tides and disappearing nations in the Pacific Islands and Indian Ocean. And then we looked at the politics, climate change and immigration debates, how these are two of the most hotly contested issues in US contemporary society. And we looked at the history of misinformation and including the history of racism and anti-immigrant sentiment in the American environmental movement. And then we had a week where we visited the library and we had an intense discussion about the quality of sources and doing research and really interrogating everything that we encounter, not just in the library and doing academic research, but in the news as well. And then the last couple weeks, we got to the present and we started to look forward. We started discussing intersectional solutions rooted in racial, gender, environmental, and economic justice. And the final week we had project presentations. And those individually selected research projects ranged all over the world and all over time. We had projects on the US Dust Bowl and the Great Depression, on the Syrian Civil War, comparing Cuba and the United States' hurricane preparedness, the role of US imperialism in displacing Haitians, Marshallese and Tuvalu climate refugee art and activism, the history of Rex Tillerson and Exxon, and the role of drought in Nicaraguan farmers' sense of identity, rhetorical analysis of the US media on both the left and the right on climate change and denialism. And so this was really a really fruitful, excellent class. So once the course was over, we discussed ways in which, for those students who were interested, in which their research could live on and, as I like to say, become actionable. And here's where I would brag about some of my student achievements stemming from the course. One of my students is currently working on a piece for UCI's Insight magazine, which is, quote, a digital and print publication focused on making poverty visible and knowledge actionable. She's, from her research paper, she's working on a piece on how drought and access to water relates to outcomes for women and children in sub-Saharan Africa. Another of my students received a fellowship from UCI's Office of Sustainability, and he is now a Community Resilience Fellow. And then another student has just let me know that he got a job with the UN at the International Organization for Migration, and he will be moving to Bangladesh this summer to advocate for migrants. So I've also enlisted some of my students to collaborate with the work that I do at Civic, Community Initiatives for Visiting Immigrants in Confinement. We are a network of 43 visitation programs that serve detention facilities in 19 states. We are primarily volunteer driven. We also monitor conditions in facilities, track conditions, file complaints, and hold the government accountable. We also advocate for individuals and for policy change. And then the work that I head up is what we call storytelling. So I'm in the process of building an archive of stories of people affected by immigration detention. And part of that project is a blog that I am the editor-in-chief of called Imprint. So here is another contribution from one of my students from our course who just wrote this piece called Uninhabitable: Intersections Between Climate Justice and Migration for Imprint. And that is hosted on the platform Medium. So it's www.medium.com/IMM-print. And we also produce a handful of other multimedia stories projects, and this is just to show an example of the types of projects that we do, as immigration detention is a very hard to access space. So what we do is we will pair audio of someone calling us from detention and with their permission recording their story. And we might pair it with artwork that they've sent us or animations that we draw or other photos or imagery, and we put together a video. So here's a short example of this kind of project.
Well, it's a place that makes you break your heart all the time. It was October 31st, and we have a lot of Kool-Aids for drinking, which not everybody drinks because they are not really a good flavor. But it has colors, so we try to mix it with a little bit of water, and we try to make makeup. We could use the color pencils as the line your eyes. So we were playing and pretending to have makeup, and everybody gets involved. And we got too much fun that we didn't care what's going to be the risk of it. But the deputies, they got a fun day. Next day, they told us we wouldn't be able to have makeup in the detention at all. If the officer catch you with the items, they will put you in the hole. Every time that you have like something else or something different that you could do to distract your mind, the officers, they always come and take your options to be free. They don't let you to do anything different. They don't let you to be a human being or to think. They don't let you to be yourself.
So that gives an idea of the types of videos that we can produce. And this was a video narrated by a woman named Marcela Castro, who was detained in Orange County, and that is her artwork that's featured in the film. Actually, through conversations with several of my students from Climate Refugees course, we've come up with a new project that we're working on, which is another stories project in a similar vein to the previous detention stories project. But this one will be called Climate Refugees: Environmental Justice Detained. and it will comprise of 5 to 6 short animated videos featuring the stories of climate refugees in limbo. So, people in U.S. immigration detention, in refugee camps abroad, or people who have been subjected to deportation. We're hoping to feature the stories of people from places such as Haiti, the Marshall Islands, Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and Central America. And the team that we've put together are former students, undergraduates, with the sponsorship of UCI's Office of Sustainability, and one of my students from the course who I mentioned earlier, who is now a Community Resilience Fellow at the Office of Sustainability, Beau Darafant. He is an artist and also an immigrant rights organizer, and so I have to credit him with much of the inspiration for this project, and he will be the artistic director for it. I'm also working with a professor at Cal State Long Beach who is currently on a research trip this summer with students in Costa Rica to interview people in refugee camps. And we would love to report on in the Stories Project how Costa Rica is responding to the current refugee, quote, crisis as a humanitarian rather than a national security issue. And then we've also enlisted support from UCSD's Critical Refugee Studies Collective. So as you can see, the heart of this project is a very intersectional approach where we really want it to help push narratives forward that understand the connections between environmental and migrant justice. Another inspiration for the project is an artist named Stephanie Kamba, or Soul Tree, who is a friend of Beau's, and she has agreed to be interviewed for our project and provide some of her artwork, which is seen here. And so this project, it's just in the early stages. We don't have any video to show just yet. We hope to complete it by mid-next school year and hopefully host a launch event on campus at UCI, possibly other campuses, and at our Office of Civic in Los Angeles. And I do plan to disseminate it to the CAN network. And along with the launch of these collection of short videos, we will be developing a viewing and community discussion toolkit and also some curriculum that can be used in middle and high school and college classrooms. So stay tuned for the development of this project. Thank you very much. You can contact me at kshull@uci.edu. More than happy to have more collaborators on this project, so please reach out to me if you're interested, or if you'd like to talk about grant sources and possibly models for other similar types of projects. More than happy to. So I will end there and play some of Stephanie Kamba's music.
Today we march on stolen lands. We march for those who work with tired hands. Today we march on stolen lands. We march for our people too scared to stand. 3/20/2010. Instead of celebrating, we are back at it again. The civil rights movement is ongoing, there's no end. Until oppressive laws are removed and we amend. How this nation sees, hears, and labels people who are undocumented. How this nation needs, fears, and disables people who are undocumented.